All right, welcome. Let's just dive right into this. Today in this explainer, we're going to explore a massive, and I mean massive paradigm shift in how we understand Islamic political thought. We're going to be breaking down some major myths and looking at some absolutely fascinating historical and political concepts straight from our source text. It's a profound book that really digs into the transition from modern enslavement to the universality of Islam. So get ready, because this is probably going to fundamentally change how you view a highly debated and, honestly, a very often misunderstood topic. Let me start right out of the gate with a pretty provocative question. Is there actually a single caliph mandated in Sharia texts? Now, I know exactly what you might be thinking. The media, various political groups, and just our common assumptions have painted a very, very specific picture of this word over the years. But our source text challenges those preconceived notions head-on. Is there truly an ancient text out there demanding a single autocratic ruler for everyone? Well, before we answer that, we really need to ground ourselves. The foundational texts begin with the beautiful phrase, "In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful." And that mindset is absolutely key for us right now. We need to actively put aside all the modern political noise, discard the distractions, and really invite ourselves to dive deep into the grounded source material. We're looking at what the text actually say, not what people claim they say.
So here's a totally mind-blowing point straight from the text. The term Khalifa, when it's used to describe a specific, single, authoritarian individual holding absolute power, that doesn't actually exist in the foundational Sharia texts as a rigid political mandate. No way. What does exist is Khilafah, with an H at the end. The text makes it crystal clear that Khilafah is not an individual person, it's a comprehensive, integrated political institution and system. It's an administrative structure, not a single superhero or a dictator.
And that brings us to this really famous phrase, Khilafah on the Prophetic Methodology. Our source explains a really vital distinction here, which is that we absolutely must separate divine principles from worldly mechanisms. Think of it kind of like a car. The divine principles, justice, consultation, the core engine of the system, those remain constant. But the worldly chassis, the administrative mechanisms, the steering wheel, the tires, those are supposed to evolve. The Prophet's methodology was all about applying those core ethical values, not freezing time just to keep ancient administrative structures around forever.
In fact, we can clearly trace this evolution over time. In the prophetic era, we obviously had foundational governance based directly on revelation. Then moving into the Rashidun era, the system naturally evolved into something that actually resembled a federal system, just to manage the growing territory. Next, Caliph Omar famously introduced what were called diwans, which were essentially early government ministries created to handle expanding public needs. And moving all the way to the modern era, we see the absolute necessity for modern ministries and complex state structures. You see, the system was never static, it continuously adapted. So, you might be wondering, why exactly must these administrative structures evolve? Well, because society becomes infinitely more complex. Needs and populations grow exponentially over centuries. Today, governing requires thousands of diverse specializations: economics, healthcare, engineering, cybersecurity. The author firmly, and I mean firmly, debunks the myth that a single individual could possibly manage a modern society all alone without being held accountable. Actually, the text literally compares clinging to ancient administrative structures to abandoning cars so you can ride camels on the modern highway. It just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so if the system isn't a dictatorship run by one person, what is it? Well, it's Shura. Consultation. Shura is the absolute beating heart and the core engine of this entire political system. According to the source, this is the exact, specific mechanism that prevents the Khilafah from degrading into a monarchy or a tyranny. It is a framework built entirely 100% on collective wisdom.
So how does Shura actually operate in practice? The text clearly breaks this down into two main functions. First up, Shura is used for choosing the governing institution itself. It's a selection process. It's definitely not about pledging blind allegiance to some mysterious, unknown individual who suddenly claims power out of thin air. And second, Shura is the mechanism for making ijtihadi, or interpretive, policy decisions. It's an active, ongoing legislative process that requires real debate and consensus.
Which leads us to this really stark contrast highlighted in the source. On one side, we have true Caliph-The, which features Shura in both choosing its leadership and in making legislative decisions. On the flip side, we have Mulk, which translates to oppressive kingship. The absolute defining characteristic of oppressive kingship is that it completely lacks Shura and relies entirely on force and coercion.
The source basically proves that any system lacking consultation, no matter what righteous-sounding name it calls itself, inevitably devolves into oppressive rule.
The author makes a really emphatic statement on this concept, saying, "The right to establish God's law on earth is not monopolized by certain parties over other Muslims around the world." This is foundational stuff. The text envisions this system as a deeply anti-authoritarian, anti-monopoly project. It belongs to the entire global community. It is absolutely not an exclusive franchise for extremist clubs, specific political parties, or self-proclaimed groups to hijack and just lord over everyone else.
So the crucial question then becomes, how do you actually scale up Shura for billions of people today? Well, the text introduces a brilliant modern concept to achieve exactly this: majalis al-ikhtisasat, or councils of specialization. This involves creating highly specialized councils that integrate all segments of society. It's all about bringing together the doctors, the engineers, the economists to provide precise, scientific results for governance, and this spans all the way from local municipal levels right up to the federal level. This completely replaces that outdated, overly simplistic idea of the single rulers sitting in a room making all the decisions.
All of this smoothly transitions us to the macro vision of the author, which is actually perfectly captured in the title of the book itself: Transformation from Contemporary Enslavement to the Universality of Islam. We're moving from the mechanics of governance to the ultimate big-picture purpose of this system. It is not an empire designed for dominance or conquering or subjugation. No, its stated purpose is to literally liberate humanity from modern forms of enslavement and to bring about true universal justice.
And what does that liberation actually look like on a global scale? The ultimate vision is the United Islamic Nations. The end goal described in our source isn't some single, borderless, chaotic blob that just erases local identities. Far from it. Rather, it's a massive, structured, integrated network of nations working together. Think of it like a highly functional, ethically driven version of the UN, entirely dedicated to global justice, mutual protection, and uplifting humanity.
What's really fascinating to me here is the author's intense pragmatism. I mean, you can't just wave a magic wand and unite the world overnight, right? The text maps out a very logical, gradual, step-by-step path. Step 1, electing a central coordinating authority. Step 2, strengthening the economic and popular ties between populations. Step 3 involves gradually unifying sovereign ministries, things like economics or defense, where it makes logical sense. And finally, Step 4, the formal formation of the United Islamic Nations. It's a strategic, long-term roadmap that actually respects reality.
Now, we really must be crystal clear about the specific features of this integrated system. This is a framework deeply rooted in humility and reform. It protects member states from oppression. But pay close attention to these last 2 points, because they completely destroy the media stereotype of a dominating, bloodthirsty empire. The text explicitly states that this system welcomes non-Islamic states seeking protection, and crucially, it allows those local populations to keep their own religious laws and judiciaries. It's a system built on integration and protection, for sure, not forced assimilation.
Which brings us to a deeply provocative thought I want to leave you with. If the true Khalifa, as described directly in the sources, is actually a highly consultative, scientifically adaptable system for global justice rather than a single dictatorship, well, how does this reshape our responsibilities today? It really forces us to leave behind our misconceptions, doesn't it? It challenges us to stop waiting for some mythical figure to appear and instead start doing the hard, specialized, consultative work of building just systems in our own communities. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive explainer. Let this question really sit with you as you rethink the future of global governance.